Well, welcome in, LSU fans, to another edition of the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West, and the Tigers wrapping up the spring portal cycle with the number one portal class in the country per 24/7 Sports. But Glenn, quite a haul in terms of going back to December. We've talked a lot about this. They did a lot of their early work and really, I mean, for lack of a better words, just getting after it in December, addressing needs, getting those guys into the mix. And it kind of led to this idea that what would they do in the spring portal cycle? I mean, you would kind of evaluate your needs. Where do you feel like you need to shore up? And even leaving the spring cycle, I think they kind of felt good about the roster. But they do add, like we've talked about, Bernard Gooden last week, the defensive lineman who should help. But the news kind of breaking on Sunday evening, and if you've been a Go 24/7 subscriber, you kind of felt like this was coming. AJ Haulcy, the former Houston Cougar safety, and chooses, I guess we could say, LSU over the Miami Hurricanes in what was a twisting and turning of fun recruitment to cover. But Glenn, from on the field, we can talk about how it happened, but from on the field, I know you wrote a piece of how this fits into what LSU wants to do. AJ Haulcy should be fun to watch in the purple and gold.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is kind of the last box that went unchecked for LSU in terms of where we felt like they could add another piece to really improve the roster and not just be a depth piece, but be a piece that can come in and immediately contribute to the team. And I certainly feel that way with Halsey. I feel that way with Gooden. And what those two moves actually did was they not only have the number one class in the portal this year, they actually have the number three portal class all time. You got to go back to 2022 to find a couple rosters or a couple of seasons there, or a couple 2022. I should say a couple of teams that had better numbers, at least on paper, than LSU, and that was the 2022 USC class that was number one overall, and then the 2022 Ole Miss class was number two overall. So, and that USC class had Caleb Williams and a bunch of other guys in it, and so I think, look, LSU did exactly what it needed to do in the portal this year. Their talent level has increased tremendously. I think the biggest question that I think everybody has now is, okay, you've got all these new pieces in here. You've got as many as 8 or 9 new starters on the defensive side of the ball. You've got several key offensive weapons that you're going to need to ingratiate into the offensive side of things this offseason. How do all the pieces fit together is going to be the challenge, but also the fun part about these next couple of months when you're following this team and what they're able to do. So when you talk specifically about Halsey, I think we touched on him some last week on one of our pods, and I just think he's a plug and play starter. Like I think he's somebody that's done it at a high level now for a couple of years at Houston, and older veteran, been around the block, has got the numbers and the production that shows that he can be an impact piece for you, and at a position where LSU, quite frankly, struggled a lot last year. I mean, Brian Kelly talked about it a number of times in the middle of the season, just how much they needed better play from that group in particular. And Halsey's a big physical tackler. He's going to be a guy that, I mean, if you've been perusing on social media, there's a video of him tackling Jaden Daniels in the open field from a couple of years ago. That's no easy feat. So he's somebody that I think is going to fit in really well with this defensive scheme, and should really help boost that play in the back half of the defense.
You talk about just the fit in general, and you said something there that's going to obviously perk the ears up of LSU fans, a sure tackler from the safety position. Not only, Glenn, I mean, you go look at some of the losses in 2024, but obviously, kind of dating back, the Achilles heel has been run defense. I believe it's over 215 yards, and all of their losses in SEC play have come. They've seen over 215 yards gains against them on the ground. It's a trend, and it's something they need to shore up. And we talked earlier in the season, I guess the portal season we can talk about or say, is the addition of Jack Pyburn and what that could do up front for him. But Halsey gives them that physical presence. And I wanted to say this too, because I know you've been kind of leaning this way maybe a little bit, and you can talk about it, that the addition of Halsey, like, look, you don't go after him if you don't think he can help the team. Like that is what it is. But they still really like Deshaun Spears, and they like what he could bring to the table. So if he's in a battle with Deshaun Spears or any of those guys at the back end, at the very least, like, Halsey is a 1-year guy, right? Like, he is a guy who is going to be here for one season. Deshaun Spears, if he's willing and willing to kind of not be the guy here in year number 2, which is obviously a big talking point. That's a great guy to learn from because Spears is a very physical, imposing type of safety, has the body for that. Could definitely learn from Haulcy and then maybe be ready to take over that role as the bona fide number 1 safety on this roster in 2026. It's getting far ahead, but at the very least, if you can keep everyone happy, Glenn, it kind of feels like this could be a situation where it's a learning experience for Deshaun Spears and chance for him to continue to grow into that role.
Yeah, and I don't mean to gloss over the fact that I think Halsey's going to be a starter by not saying that there's going to be competition at that position,
Yeah.
because I really do think there will be, and I think Deshaun Spears has as good a chance as anybody to see some serious uptick in playing time this season, and he had a really nice spring. I thought he looked probably the best of the safeties that were returning this past spring. And look, there's probably scenarios where Halsey and Spears can play together on the field, and you move somebody like Tamarcus Cooley up to the nickel spot and closer to the line of scrimmage where he was getting a little bit of work in this spring. So there's just a lot of different ways that LSU can go about this in the secondary. And I think honestly what the Haulcy move shows me or tells me is that they feel really confident about Monster Delane at corner. Like
Yeah.
I think you only go to Monster Delane at corner is if there's nobody else back there that is taking that next step as a player that can play alongside Halsey or Spears or whoever it is. Like I think that that move really shores things up from a cornerback perspective for LSU. And look, they've done a really nice job of getting experienced veteran guys all across this defense, which is something they
Yeah.
desperately needed after losing a bunch of guys to the draft and a bunch of guys to the portal. You needed to get older. You needed to get more experience. You needed to hit the Big 10, hit the Big 12, hit the ACC, go get some of the top performers from those conferences and plug and play them into your defense here. And I think that LSU did a really nice job of doing that. And this class, this portal class as a whole, did a really nice job of addressing all of the needs that were on this roster that you could have said this is a hole leaving last season. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think, and I talked about this with someone today. I just think this addition of Halsey does 2 things for you. It elevates the floor of what you have in that room, Glenn, in terms of the talent and experience, but it also allows you to develop these young guys. On this secondary, we've talked so much about just how you've been forced to put guys in positions maybe they weren't ready for. And I think a guy that maybe caught a lot of flack for that, and we haven't talked a ton about him really, is Ashton Stamps, just because of had to come in and play as a young player, was forced into that role for the past 2 years. And honestly, he's a 3-star recruit. I think he's lived up to exactly what you thought he would be in terms of that, maybe even a little bit more. But to that point, the addition of Halsey just says, okay, you know what? We like our young guys, but we don't have to put them in a spot to where we're sitting in mid-October, and maybe they weren't ready. Maybe they weren't ready to take on the full amount. Now, like you mentioned, and we talked about a lot. I think Blake Baker, Jake Olson, Brian Kelly, they think Deshaun Spears has the capability to step into that role this season. I will say this, and this is what I like about the move, Glenn. This is a move showing, hey, we know that we can compete this year. We need to go in all in and kind of the roster we have. And that kind of takes us to the next point. You mentioned the final piece to the puzzle in terms of the portal. It's all there on paper. And Glenn, we're going to talk about it, I guess for the next today's May the 5th. So we got 3 months until fall camp starts. That's going to be the big talking point. When you look at this roster on paper, how do you feel about it? Where do you feel like this is? Because I think this is definitely a championship, not more bust, but this is a roster they feel like can compete for a championship. They're going all in kind of with the group they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a good question posed to our board members, and I can't remember who it was that wrote it, but does this feel like an all-in LSU season, or is this a sign of things to come? And I think
Mm.
my response was, why can't it be both? I
Right.
think that LSU is in a position now where you look at the long-term future and you look at kind of the amount of resources they were willing and able to pour into this season. We'll see kind of how it alters or shakes out when revenue sharing gets here. But I think that they have very clearly shoved aside the notion that they can't compete with the big boys in terms of the top dollar free agents out there or the top dollar freshmen out there. Like, I think that they have squandered that quite a bit here with their moves this offseason. So you look ahead to what this current roster looks like. This is a definitely a push all the chips in kind of roster for LSU and at all positions. Like I think that they have really done a nice job of building this thing out with not only their returning pieces, but the freshmen that they brought in. I think there's a number of freshmen that could potentially contribute on this roster. But certainly the core of this is going to be how many of the transfer portal targets and signees are able to contribute at a winning level, like at a higher winning level than maybe they've had in past years. This was very much a calculated group of players that were targeted very early in the process in most cases to radically improve this roster and get them into a place where they're not only in playoff contention but the ability to move far into the playoffs. And I think, look, when you get into those 12-team, playoff modes, it's tough. I mean, Ohio State was a great team last year. They had a great run in the playoff. Weren't they like the 7th or 8th seed in the playoff this last year? I thought they were a little bit further down in terms of the 1 to 12 rankings. So just because if you're an LSU team and you look at the playoff and you're sitting in that 8, 9, 10 range of the playoff, and maybe one of the last teams to get in there, you got to approach it like you would approach a March Madness, or you would approach a NCAA baseball tournament, like a regional tournament or something. Like it's all square. Like there's only 12 teams left, and most of the time, most of those teams can beat any other team, or at least the top programs can. There's certainly some cases there where there were a couple blowouts with some of the smaller teams that made it into the to the tournament, but or the playoff. But I think LSU, from a roster perspective, is in a really good position to be able to be one of those teams that can make a deep playoff push, and that was the entire goal of this last offseason, was to get this roster to a point where they can not only get to the playoff, but they can compete once they've gotten there.
Brad Crawford, I don't know if you saw this, Glenn, wrote a great piece on kind of this move with Haulcy and kind of what it means in terms of the roster here in 2025 and truly the pressure surrounding Brian Kelly. And I wanted to kind of pose this question. You did a great job of breaking that down, but just I don't know if you got a chance to read that. If you haven't, not just you, but obviously our subscribers as well. It's over there on cbssports.com. Great partnership that you can check out, both that content. But Crawford really kind of talks about in that piece, Glenn, that this is an all-in type of feel. Like you got Garrett Nussmeier back for 2025. And I don't know if there was really much hoopla about it. And there's been so much that's happened since then, Glenn. But I think for a period of time, you're like, hey, would he test the NFL waters? And, we'll see and everything. But you get Garrett Nussmeier to come back. You retain, I think, a core piece of your roster while adding, obviously, to around the edges to where you feel like, hey, this is a roster we think can go win an SEC title in Atlanta. We think can go win a playoff game at home or on the road and compete in the quarterfinals. And once you get there, like you mentioned with the March Madness thing, you see what happens once you get to the playoff. I know we just talked about this, but in terms of the pressure on Brian Kelly here in year 4, and we're gonna lay this out so much. You're gonna see it so much during SEC media days. Where do you gauge the pressure on Brian Kelly with the way they have spent, with we go back to that, signing day press conference where Kelly was really candid about NIL and where it needed to be. And it feels like the Tigers are amongst the big spenders in the NIL space here this past cycle. Where do you kind of gauge maybe, I don't know, I don't want to pigeonhole you into some numbers here, but 1 to 10, like where do you feel like the pressure is to make a playoff maybe for LSU here in 2025?
Well, my answer was going to be like, it depends on what your expectations are for this team and what there's a couple different buckets you can place that into. Like if LSU, for example, misses the playoffs this coming year, I think it'll be very, very high, like in terms of pressure on Brian Kelly and what the actual future of this program is looking like. If you make the playoffs but are bounced out in the first round or two, you're probably still a little miffed if you're the fan base, or if you're kind of the outsiders looking in at this program with all the expectations going in. But I don't think you're at nearly as high of a risk of pressure if you're able to make the playoff and go and get maybe a win or something like that. But if you're a team that's able to get into that Final Four kind of semifinal matchups, I don't think there's much pressure at all after next year. So I think that's just a roundabout way of me saying, like, maybe a 5 at a 1 to 10 if
Okay,
we
yeah.
approach the season. Like I we said going into last year, like if LSU had a really, really poor season last year, there was no pressure on him at all in terms of like
Yeah.
a
Job
potentially
security. Yeah.
potential yeah, job security. But certainly now, I mean, you spent a good deal of money on this roster to make sure that you are in that position. And look, uh, I've seen a number of mock drafts already that have as many as 4 or 5 Clemson players in the first round. Like that is going to be an absolute mammoth of a win that you're going to have to try to go scrape out at that place in August. So, look, is there potential here after game one that you could be looking at another, 0-1 start and having to really play your way through the SEC with only one loss? Yes, like that's very much on the table. I think this Clemson game is as tough a first game as LSU's had, certainly since Brian Kelly got there. But going back to before Kelly was there, going back to 2019 when they won their first game. So, look, that's the pressure after a game like that is going to be immense. I mean, we saw it a couple years ago. We saw it last year. Just the gut reaction after losing a game like that, and the importance of kind of bouncing back quickly and having a good season still. So, look, I think there's going to be some pressure on this team to certainly win and win at a high level. And but at the end of the day, I don't know, barring a catastrophe kind of year where they are not even close to making the playoffs or anything
Yeah.
like that. Like I don't think the job security thing or the pressure is going to be overwhelmingly high if LSU falls maybe a peg short of being a championship team.
Our subscribers over at Go 24/7 kind of filled out a survey that I'm going to be putting together to kind of display what they thought a successful season would be, Glenn. And you kind of hinted at that there, but I think just kind of closing, putting a bow on that conversation. Look, is 2025 an all-in season? Yes, but I like the way you put it. Is that there's an eye to the future with the way they have stacked recruiting classes with this 2026 cycle that we all kind of believe could be really special. We'll hit on that here in just a second, where they can win now, but it's not necessarily a situation where next year you're going to lose so much that you really can't compete, if that makes sense. And that should never be the case at a place like LSU. Like I want to say that too. That should never be at LSU at a place like LSU. You should never be all in on one year to where it hurts you for the next year or two, type of thing. So I like where the roster is, Glenn, coming out of spring. I said on a radio hit today that I had been kind of in the camp of where this team could maybe win, safely 8 to 9 games. Does Haulcy get you up to a 10-win season? Maybe it can. And then once you get to 10 wins, you were talking about that's a playoff bubble team. And even in the right year, I do believe in terms of the SEC, 9-3 could get you in there. But I know Tiger fans just want to win that first one against Clemson there on August the 30th.
You win that Clemson game, we've been saying
Ooh,
it since January. You win that Clemson game, you're not only showing the country that you're a playoff contender, you're showing them you're a championship contender. If you go into that place and win that game on week one, that's been my position the entire time.
and it's backed up by those way too early mock drafts, Glenn. That Clemson team's loaded
Yeah.
defensively. They've got some really. It's going to be a fun storylines as we get closer to August 30th. A bit of recruiting news before we get out of here. As we've recorded this, and I think probably like 30, 40 minutes before we hit that record button, Glenn, Jared Curtis, highly touted quarterback per 24/7 Sports, announced his commitment. I should say recommitment to Georgia. He had backed off that pledge, had a big ceremony there at his high school in Nashville, elects to commit to Georgia over Oregon. And you're probably saying, well, Bryce, why does this matter? It's not because I'm from the state of Georgia. It's because we could see a domino effect with this, Glenn. We have talked a lot about LSU's quarterback options in the 2026 class. Who has it really been? It feels like Joe Sloan and company kind of honed in on maybe 2 guys. Jake Fett has been one of them, but Bo Bentley, who had Georgia in that final kind of pairing of 3 schools, is there for the taking, I think is the best way to put it, Glenn, because now the big call here is for, Joe Sloan and companies, hey, do you want to go? Not that, I mean, you're going to negatively recruit. That kind of happens, but you're going to lay it out for a kid. Do you want to go compete at a place like Georgia where now you've got another highly touted guy there and you still have talent here, Michael Van Buren and whoever they're going to take out of the 2027 class, but you can be our guy for this 2026 class. Oklahoma's in the mix too. You and I were kind of talking about that. I don't know how real that is in terms of being maybe the 1A, 1B option because it was one of his childhood favorite schools. But for Bo Bentley, Glenn, does the pitch change, you think, now for LSU? I don't want to say the Tigers are the favorite, but you kind of have to feel good. Like if they want him, they deploy the resources to go get him. It feels like they got a pretty good shot.
Oh, I mean, I think that LSU is absolutely the favorite right now. I mean, if you look at, especially with what just happened with Curtis committing to Georgia, like I mean, unless Georgia's just got a bunch of money to throw at, a two quarterback freshman class, it really does seem like it's going to come down to LSU and Oklahoma right now. And everything that, some of our national recruiting sites have said, like I did this piece last week where I reached out to a bunch of our national recruiting scouts and analysts about just kind of one question they had about what LSU needs to fill in the rest of this 2026 class. And of the 5 answers that I got, 4 of them were quarterback related. And all
Mm-hmm.
4 of them said that LSU is in a really good spot with Bo Bentley. And so that's a major credit to what Joe Sloan has been able to do ever since they made that offer back in, I believe it was February, maybe it was a little bit before that. But they have brought him in on campus, a couple times. He'll be back for his official visit on June the 20th, the last official visit weekend for players before kind of that summer dead period hits. So LSU's in a really good spot here for Bo Bentley, and just watching some of his film, I think he's the real deal. Like he's got a lot of great tools that you look for in a young quarterback. He's a little bit of the kind of the bigger built, bigger barreled, big kind of quarterback who's
Mm-hmm.
probably more of a pocket passer, but he can move. Like I've seen, some tape of him, and he's got some wheels to him when he gets going. So he's been kind of a late. I don't want to say a late bloomer because we still got a whole 7-8 months left of this recruiting class, but the last 3 or 4 months in particular, he's taken some really giant steps that a lot of the scouts and analysts have taken notice of. So if he were to join this LSU quarterback room for the future, I think it'd be the home run guy to get over the next several months for LSU to close out this 2026 group. But he's somebody that I think you've got to really keep an eye on if you're an LSU fan going forward here, because I think the opportunity is there for the taking for him, and it just makes a lot of sense considering where LSU's at right now roster wise with that position. Because after Garrett Nussmeier leaves in 2025, you think you have a succession plan, maybe with Michael Van Buren, maybe Colin Hurley, maybe some of these guys are on the current roster able to develop, but it doesn't feel as secure in terms of like, oh, this is definitely the guy after Nussmeier, which
Yeah.
you kind of had that feeling after Jaden Daniels that Nussmeier was going to be that guy. So
Yeah.
you don't get that feeling here, which could open up a true competition next year for anybody that's brought in for over the next 7 months for LSU. So I think that's a very significant development that Georgia landed Jared Curtis, and kind of, I don't want to say completely takes the Bulldogs out of the race for Bo Bentley, but I think certainly only helps the teams like Oklahoma and LSU as they kind of look forward to those official visits here in June.
If you haven't already, I encourage fans to go check this out because this kind of puts maybe to what Glenn was saying about his game. And Glenn put together a good piece last week, like he was talking about. You can check that out on our site. If you never have, go check out the profiles of these kids. And our scouting team does a great job of kind of giving reports and also some player comps. And I know a lot of LSU fans may not have watched this young man, but you probably will this year. He will play LSU at some point. But the comp for Bo Bentley is John Mateer. And I don't know how much you guys have watched of John Mateer, but a guy that can do it both with his legs and his arm. Was talking with Bud Elliott about Mateer. He feels like he's a guy that he's pretty bad defense. He's really good at both those things. Here's the part of the scouting report that I liked. Our own Hudson Standish of 24/7 Sports did. Commands a schematically diverse offense that ranged from traditional under center formations to empty spread sets. So what does that tell me, Glenn? Maybe something LSU fans would like to see. He's comfortable going under center. He's comfortable being in the shotgun, which is a really important thing when you're talking about the transition from the high school to college game as well. So great stuff there from Hudson Standish. Glenn wrote a good piece on that last week, and I kind of echo your sentiments. I feel like LSU was in really great position before Jared Curtis committed. I don't want to say this cements it, but I think this could establish LSU as a leader heading into OV season. which we'll have all that content and more of, man. It's going to be a fun summer, a
It
fun
gets
June as LSU tries to wrap up a 2026 class.
Yeah, they get started later this week. They bring in
Yeah.
tight end Gavin Mueller from, I believe it's up in Indiana. Can't remember exactly where he's from, but he's a 3-star tight end. He'll be in for his official visit, and then is slated to make a decision, I believe, on the 14th of May. So it'll be coming very shortly after his LSU official visit, and certainly getting that last crack at a player like that. You hope LSU can close the deal and add their first tight end to this 2026 class. So that's one to watch here in the immediate future.
I don't know how many Tiger fans we have up in that neck of the woods, Glenn, but I don't want you to get crucified for it. It's Illinois, not Indiana. I
Oh,
know that
shoot.
for us people down south, we
Uh-oh.
tend to just group all those states together. But no, in all
That's
seriousness,
whoopsie.
also too, July 4th, you need to go ahead and mark your calendars. Lamar Brown and Ethan Booby Feaster on the all-name team, both announcing their decisions that day. That could be a big day of fireworks, no pun intended, for LSU fans there as well. But recruiting season is hot and ready to go. So make sure you check out Go 24/7 for all your LSU Tiger needs, both on and off the field. Baseball in full swing with the big series upcoming against Arkansas. And we'll have some great coverage for you all week long and into the summer months before the season cranks up in late August. So for Glen West, my name is Bryce Koon. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button over on the YouTube page, subscribe to the channel, and check us out on all those podcast platforms. We appreciate you, and thanks so much for listening and watching another edition of the Go 24/7 podcast.